I have mainly gotten people through speaking and certain blogs or things like that, but it's up in the maybe the 300s or something like that, and it's not, I understand you need like thousands or something awful like that.
You gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's how I
Better than
feel.
one,
I
like your
absolutely,
mom.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Hey, you.
Exactly.
But, yeah, I just wondered if you had anything to add or encourage on tricks, any things that I might be turning over and utilizing.
What are you
out there.
writing? What's your focus?
I'm a life coach, and my tagline, I'm also doing a little bit of radio called It's Adversity to Awesome, so it's overcoming adversity and using it as a launch pad to create a new life.
Right.
And
Do you have time to consistently write sort of focused pieces on what you do for whether it's Medium or Forbes? There are contributor networks that in particular are great for, nonfiction. Tess, you can probably speak for this. And usually sort of like this how-to where you can give people, share knowledge. You need to be, the most important part of that is consistency. And then you've got the little bio at the bottom, and you can say, come join me on with my newsletter, for example, and and maybe offer a freebie, even if it's just like a 5-page PDF, right, of like tips or tricks or something that your audience, a takeaway, and that gets them on board. But then again, you need the consistency again. And so it's really about the content creation, right? I mean, we almost have to be our own mini publishing empires.
Right.
yes.
You really do need to start thinking about yourself and your work as that, because you need to be the one churning out the content.
And in addition to those, LinkedIn is a good place for life coaches.
Really?
And that's my biggest
Absolutely.
resource in the business space.
Okay.
But for life coaches, absolutely, you can post on there
Yeah.
the original writing, or you can double post from your blog or a Medium or a Thrive.
I've just started doing that. That's
Psychology Today also takes contributions, which those are harder. You have to really differentiate yourself because
Which one
there's
is that?
Psychology Today.
Oh, okay.
So that's another place, but again, you're gonna have to be consistent. And the Forbes Coaches Council is another good one. I think there's a price tag on that. I'm not sure how big it is yet.
I'm just writing down.
Yeah.
I think it is really, there's so many different outlets that you can choose to concentrate on. I think the key really is finding the one
Right,
that you're gonna give time to.
right,
Because you cannot maintain 6 different
No.
social media.
right.
You can't.
Right.
No one can.
And the one that fits you, like, I'm not gonna suggest LinkedIn to our poet in the back, but
No.
for you, yes,
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think Instagram
absolutely.
would be a fantastic way for you to reach people.
I actually have I have an Instagram open, so.
See?
Keep building it.
That's probably your key, that's your way in. And just make sure everything, yes, give them the information, yes, give them the freebies, but the payment is that they need to like and follow in order to get it, or to get sign up for your newsletter in order to get the PDF. Everything you have to make sure you get. You have to collect the likes and the follows and the email addresses. I am a big fan
You need
of
them.
email lists, and you need to have the data collection. You need to know who's coming to see you. You have to know their name and their email so you can reach out to them.
And you should sign up. Have you ever signed up for HARO, Help a Reporter Out?
Yeah,
Love
that's
Help
It's a
Reporter
great
Out.
free
Reporter
resource.
Out.
Is it still
Love it.
free?
It's free. It's free.
And they send you queries 3
Across the
times a
board,
day.
It's free for the
I think so.
participants and
I think it's free.
Yeah.
Oh, for the journalists? I don't know. But
No, your journalists can just.
so 3
post
times a day in your
queries.
inbox, you get this list of queries of reporters looking for sources. So very good for a life coach. I mean, you could just sit there and respond and give expert advice all day long. For that, but for any sorts of things, you'd be surprised. There's all different ranges, so everyone should sign up for it. And you literally hit reply and you sell yourself and you answer their questions, and it's a crapshoot if they pick you or not.
But it engages us, and it has to make our
Yes.
message even that much better.
Yes,
Really refined.
exactly.
So
because you need to be the expert on whatever it is.
Thank you, that's great.
Another question? Carla?
What would you, let's see how to phrase this. What would you say to someone who has not led a very conventional background because of a disability and is trying to now establish themselves, not necessarily as an authority, just because that wouldn't even fit as part of the branding anyway, but as a guide or something?
I have a writer friend who's she's a journalist and she's in a wheelchair. And the media has now become so focused on inclusion that she's writing a lot of personal pieces about her experiences in a wheelchair. So it's like her experiences dating, her experiences even, looking at other media and finding, Ali Stroker winning
Oh
the
my
Tony
God,
Award
yes.
was huge for her. And she placed, stories for days with that, which was like, because here was a woman receiving a Tony Award and she was in a wheelchair, and that was a sort of really extraordinary event. So I think that an unusual story is so great for the media because, it does definitely sort of hit some buttons too with you have this adversity and how you triumph over it and the sort of processes that you go through to sort of get from point A to point B for them. And so I think it's something, if you're comfortable sharing and telling it, can really be an incredible story to share. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there right now to tell that story.
I agree. I think that actually that's the key to probably how you're gonna get coverage and get in the door, because your story isn't like everyone else's. And you did come, just like what you said to me was like, oh, I wanna write about you. Because I just wrote about locally, about a theater company, and the whole, the pitch on the story, it didn't come from them, it came from me reading this article about the show that they were doing and saying the lead actor had a disability, and the fact that he was cast in this leading man role was just a new thing. And I thought, oh, well, this is fantastic. Who are you? What is it that what is your disability? Because they didn't even talk about it. So I got to read this great article that brought visibility to what his life and how he's been living it, and his desire to be an actor, just like Ali Stroker, and how much she meant to him, which was huge. The whole thing about bringing visibility to just working and creating and living life with a disability, that in itself is a wonderful thing to, if you are willing to talk about it and share it, I think that that's a fantastic pitch that kind of, it works,
Thanks, Carly. Yeah?
I just co-authored my first academic and professional book. Everyone is invited to the book launch on Monday night. Here
Congratulations.
at 5:30. Woo! Thanks. We had a pretty good publisher, but I was really shocked at how little publicity they were going to do, like you mentioned.
What's the name of the book?
It's called The Library Screen Scene, Film and Media Literacy in Schools, Colleges, and Communities. So I think my pitch is about the need for media literacy right now, at this point in time, where all of a sudden, after 30 years of working in this field, I don't have to explain what it is anymore to people, because everyone thinks we need to teach people how to analyze messages that we get from the media. What my question is, lead author who's written like 7 or 8 books said, dead end with the publisher. Is it a dead end, or is there some way that we can push them a little, or tell them about alleys or other things that we know about, or when they say, that's it, you're on your own, you're on your own?
Unfortunately, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a book, and of course I would have taken. Their resources are so limited, especially academic press. I don't know if we want to throw your publisher under the bus or not, tell who they are. You wanna share?
Oxford University.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah.
But there's authors who come to me all the time that say, with OUP, what can you do to help me? And the realities are that the publicity staffs in-house are much smaller than they used to be. They're not only working on whatever amount of titles for this list, they're working on books for a year from now that are being signed and things like that. So the best way, if they're not gonna commit up front, is to start showing them that the book is moving and that the book is selling, and then therefore if they support it more, which is awful, the chicken and egg, but then you're gonna get attention if you're showing that it is working, or that whatever you're doing is selling. A lot of times when you're talking about academics, talks, doing the speaker circuit, things like that. Local NPRs all over the place cover that kind of stuff. So if you're able to do some and show that it's working, then they should either help. This is another thing you should, back to asking what publishers can do. If they're asking you to hire, can they contribute to it? They may not have the people, but can they give you a couple grand to complement whatever you're gonna put up, or something like that. So ask if they'll help pay if they're telling you that. But again, showing success and that you're all in. So many times authors who don't come to things like this will be like, oh, I wrote the book and now the publisher's gonna do it. It's like, no. The book is your baby, right? Now it's born. You're just starting. You've got 18 years to go. So you really have to do all of the nurturing and growing and feeding. And then, the doctor will check in once a year. That's your publisher's role sometimes. So, as much as just keep asking, but show that what you're doing is working, and they might throw in some support too.
Thanks.
I would also sort of suggest, if you keep an eye on how whatever you cover and write about in your book, is there a way that it's adaptable to something that's happening, in the media right now? So if it's about media literacy, can you take that and write a hot take, it's called, very quickly? It's gonna have to be a quick turnaround, and then submit it as an op-ed. And then you get that little tagline at the end, it brands you as the expert, it mentions your book, and that might be something, I don't know if you've talked to your publisher about being open to, right? I am open to doing, personal writing or this op-ed if there are opportunities, but usually you have to write it first and sort of Hail Mary it out there.
Yeah.
So just know that it could not show up and you'll have to put the work in.
Then you can put it on LinkedIn.
Right, thank you.
And just a quick tag to this is, my gut is you gotta do it.
Mhm.
They're not gonna come in and say, oh,
Yeah.
sorry
They've
about that.
added it to their table.
Yeah,
Right.
they're not gonna be like,
Right, right.
oh, yeah, right, let's go do, they're not, so you do it. But once it's born, it still has a life, and yes, it's new, but you can find all these different ways in. I have a client, Rick Massimo, author of I Got a Song, the history of the Newport Folk Festival, who wrote this book. He used to write for the Providence Journal, wrote about it when it launched. Wesleyan, I think, published it, and that was the first push of PR, and that was supported by the publisher. Well, now we are at the 60th anniversary of the Newport Folk Festival this year, and I have him, he's coming in for a week of book signings and talks in Rhode Island, because it's the hook for this book to be brought up it's newsworthy again, and he is the expert. So it's exactly what you're saying, and I think you can talk about what you've written in any way for a long time.
Yeah.
You can self-publicize. You just need to find an opening for
Right.
the conversation.
Topics like that are certainly evergreen. When you're talking about a brand new fiction book getting a review, that window is right at pub date, most likely. But a lot of these evergreen topics, as we call them, can go on and on and on and on forever. A lot of political books tend to have a shorter life, depending what they're about. Things like that, more current events kind of things. But a lot of what you guys and everyone's doing can go forever.
And you never know what it's going to turn into. Look at Mike Stanton's Buddy Cianci, Prince of Providence, which is now not this many years later, but years later, is now a work of theater that's going to be
Is it?
at Trinity Rapids doing the world, and it's their lead for their subscriptions, and who knows what your work is gonna, I don't think Mike was like, well, and someday it's gonna be on stage. I've seen him speak, and it was not the first thing he mentioned. Although I did pitch him on the.
Hamilton started the same way too.
Yes, so you don't know eventually what the life your work may have.
Just picture him and wave. Bye.
I can't wait, Trinity, I can't wait to find out who's Buddy. I did ask him if it would one day be a musical, and he was not amused.
Fred Sullivan. Fred Sullivan's gonna play like that.
Oh.
That's what I pictured.
The question about Shiva?
Yeah, I had a question about kind of striking a balance when you're pitching places between sort of the argumentative piece that you're trying to get across and the sort of personal biography piece, because I'm pretty good at the argument. I'm a lot less comfortable with the sort of, and this is why me. And is there sort of a ratio that you find useful, or
When you say argument, what do you mean?
so I mean, if you're responding, so I'm a historian, so sometimes
Okay.
things that I know about the past have some sort of relevance for what's
Okay.
going on in the present. So that's actually kind of an argument-driven kind of hook.
Right.
But they also sometimes tie into sort of personal experiences in ways that I have been less comfortable in pursuing, just because I'm sort of not trained to write that way. Not that I'm close to it. So I haven't pitched in kind of that space.
I think I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question, but I think that who you are and your experiences don't necessarily have to be, are you saying, my feeling is that it colors where you come from, but I think you're going to write your piece about the argument, but I think sometimes who you are and where you come from absolutely informs that piece.
I would take a look at the work of Lindy West. So you do look at the work of Lindy. I think she does a really great job of, and there are a lot of writers out there that do this. She just sort of really popped into my head. Who take that sort of the personal is political, and she wrote a lot about being overweight and living in a fat body, and society's reaction to her reaction to culture. And it was very raw and very great writing. And so I think that there's still a place for that kind of writing. And I think that if you can be comfortable kind of opening your wounds, and exposing that side of things in your work, I think that you will get placements. I mean, there's still room for that kind of writing, particularly in women's focused publications that are sort of taking, Condé Nast is oddly taking that sort of Gawker media torch with a lot of really meaty stuff coming out of Glamour. What?
Teen Vogue.
Teen Vogue. Oh my God, Teen Vogue.
I never thought I'd be reading Teen Vogue. But lo and behold,
I've actually taken a number of personal essay classes. There are some really great writers, instructors out there that can actually help you if that's an area that you're really uncomfortable with, to sort of help you figure out how to mine that and turn it into something that will end up in a mainstream outlet. If that's what you're interested in, I'm not sure if that.
I think you
answers the
kind of
question.
have to be comfortable with that, really comfortable with oversharing, almost, And if you're not, I don't think you have to,
Well, I think it depends what your goals are, right?
Right.
I mean, if you are and I think that this is really important for everybody when they're thinking about promoting their work, is you really need to sit down and you need to figure out, okay, what are my goals here? What are my goals with this project? What are my goals with this book release, right? And you need to figure out, okay, so this is the goal, and what do I need to get there to reach that? And so for you, it might be, okay, I need to become comfortable with, exposing the wound and rubbing some salt in it. Okay, so I'm going to do that and create this piece that I'm gonna then send to this outlet or that outlet. But, you know, I think it's also important that you need to sort of look at, as you're looking at the steps, right? Like, you're not necessarily gonna be in the New York Times, Daily Times, Boston Globe right away. So look to your local market. I mean, I will say Rhode Island media is an embarrassment of riches. For a small state, there's an awful lot of media kicking around, and they are really interested in local stories. So in a lot of ways, I think writers in particular are positioned well when they're not in a major market, like New York or LA or Chicago, because you have a local media pool that you can dip into and then build your press kit that you can then share with larger media, because, you know, media coverage begets other media coverage. You know, I mean, there was like a running joke in New York that the city section was poaching stories from The Villager, which is this, you know, years, which is like this tiny, tiny neighborhood publication. It's a freebie in the West Village, you know, and then they were always complaining that they would write about something 1 week and 2 weeks later it would show up in the New York Times, you know. So, and they weren't wrong. I mean, you know, I know that I knew if I placed something in the New York Post, 9 times out of 10, the local TV networks in New York would call me to follow up on the story. So, you know, so there are, they all read each other and it feeds off of each other.
Great. Sorry, you both went. Kristen and then Sarah.
So I'm a novelist primarily, and but my novel is not published yet, so I'm trying to get an agent or a publisher. In the meantime, I've spent the last probably 5 years building some publications. I got an essay in Good Housekeeping is probably my biggest one, but then everything else was like smaller literary journals, things like that. I just had a craft piece published, but my question is, even if I get an agent tomorrow, probably not gonna happen, but tomorrow, it's still gonna take a couple of years before the book comes out. So I guess I'd like to build an audience now, because I would love by the time the book came out to have more than, say, 300 Instagram followers. And I've been doing, I'm you know, a lot of the things that you talked about, I have a pretty good presence online. My Instagram, I think, tells a decent story about me because I also do visual art. So I try to like make it sort of entertaining, but I don't probably post once a day, you know, things like that. So I'm just curious, is there a way to make that audience start to build now, so that if and when that book comes out, you know, because I'm thinking maybe it'll be a small publisher and I really will have to do a lot of work on my own. But it sounds like I'll have to do it either way. which is fine. I'm fine with that. I just want to know if there's a way that I can start to get people on Team Kristen now.
Yeah, yeah, there are, yeah. I'm curious, what was the piece in Good Housekeeping?
I wrote an essay. It was published about a year ago, but it was a personal essay about growing up with my dad, who was an alcoholic.
Carla?
What?
Did Carla edit you?
I have to look back, but I want to say it was Devin.
Okay.
It might have been Carla, though. There were 2 different people who I dealt with.
Yeah, it was probably, she was great, right? She was,
Oh, yeah.
Carla was,
One of the best
Not
editors I've worked with. Yeah. They were really good people. Yeah.
yeah. I actually think I read your piece.
Yeah, it was called,
That's cool.
It was something about my dad was a bully, or something. My dad bullied me was the title.
I read that, yeah. I had a piece pending with them for a while, like for like 6 months, and then it, you know, always the bridesmaid.
Oh.
But yeah, so I read that. It was a really good piece, actually.
Thank you. I was actually kind of, I mean, this is totally a side note, but I was surprised to have a little vacay. I mean, it's fine.
Oh, yeah.
That's
another panel.
I'm probably like, what? No. And I had to sign away my life. But it was, again, I really wanted the
Are you still trying to get more like that?
Not an essay, no. I haven't any. I do have one that I'd love to send to Modern Love, but I'm kind of like, I feel like that's like.
Send it in September. They don't accept in July and August. Just send it.
Yeah.
And then if they reject it, send another one.
Yeah.
And then when they reject that, send the next.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, don't send the same, but
No,
yeah. You know, because a lot of times, I'm gonna tell you guys, I swear to God, it's like so weird to say, but it's a bit of a numbers game.
It is, it is.
Yeah, I think it is too, because that's happened with literary journals. For me, it's just, I'll send it, and then I'll think, well, this piece must just be awful, and then eventually someone will just be like, yeah, we want to publish this, and I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't think anybody wanted it, but.
I think because you are shopping a novel, like you don't want to self-publish, you want to go through the traditional channels,
Yeah.
and I know that like the more your byline is out there in places like Good Housekeeping, New York Times, you know, the sort of like mass market-y major outlets, the more the publishers are going to pay more attention to your book as it's being shopped. So, and particularly if you can figure out a way to get like a regular gig with like you're constantly writing for, you know, the Times or what have you. Like, I mean, Taffy Brodesser-Akner, who writes a lot of, she writes some major profiles for the New York Times. She just had a book, a novel come out, and I don't even think that she was like started her career to be a novelist. And but she got a book deal on the basis of everybody knows her. And then her book comes out, and now she's profiled in the New York Times. Of course, you know, she's on contract with them.
Right.
They kind of are taking care of their own there. She's profiled in Cosmopolitan because she's written about all of your favorite celebrities in really quirky ways. So she actually, when her book came out, it made no sense to me because it was a YA book, but whatever. She was that's fine. She did actually get a lot of ink or pixels, however you want to look at it, simply on the basis of who she was as a reporter. And I saw the same thing with Gillian Flynn. And with, you know, Gone Girl was a huge success, but, you know, she had 3 books before that, and I'm pretty sure she got the deals because she was a pretty well-known writer in Entertainment Weekly. And then she brought her friends along with her for the ride, and Scott Brown, who is a friend of mine, was one of the writers at Entertainment Weekly, and he was close with Gillian, and now he's writing on her HBO show. So, you know, there is, we were talking about it earlier, there is this, especially in that traditional world, a who you know factor. You know, and so if you can keep making those inroads in journalism as a writer, it's gonna make an agent pay attention, and then it's gonna make it's gonna be easier for them to sell your book to the publishing houses.
And I think if your goal, one of your sub-goals, your goal is also to just grow your followers in that way, it comes back to content creation. Find your avenue and share. Little. Don't share.
Yeah.
Just enough to get people to be aware of who you are, your style. And I think that, and then grow your email list through that, and grow your followers on whatever platform you're going to concentrate on. Because again, you can't split it 4 ways. But again, it comes back to that, I think.
We had a question from Sarah, and then we will come over here and see you. And then
I want to circle back to what you said about local media sources or publications. And can you speak a little bit to like the ones you like the most, or ones that you think get good traction?
Where do you live? As I ask your very personal question.
I live on the east side.
Okay, and what do you write?
I'm not asking for what I write. I'm asking because I started a literary reading series here, and so I'm just
Where
looking
does it
to,
happen?
What?
Where does it happen?
At the new 20 Stories location in Fox Point.
I love 20 stories.
They're great.
I write for Providence Monthly or Providence Media, and it sounds like a story for East Side Monthly.
Yeah, definitely.
Particularly if you need to think about, I would say 3 months in advance, 3 to 4 months in advance, because it's a monthly, so they plan things out. And in particular, if you're gonna have like a special like holiday reading series, or like, you know, if you can create something, this is okay, I'm gonna say something that's gonna make everybody go, oh, especially like creative people. Sometimes you have to create a media event, if that makes sense. You have to, you know, because you can't just sort of like, kind of like the idea of waiting for the muse to hit you, that it doesn't work like that. Like sometimes you just have to show up and put in the work. You know, similarly for media, if you can sort of like, you know, you have this literary series, And if you can structure it so that 1 month you're doing something that kind of dovetails into whether it's like, you know, broken hearts for February, or, you know, like I wrote a piece on the vagina monologues for February because they do this thing every February, you know. So if you can sort of like, I think that helps, because that helps, you know, why now is the question that a lot of editors are gonna say, like, why this and why now? And that why now is about your news hook. And so you have this series that's great. So now, why should we write about it in December? You know, like that would be, and then also like who's reading their work there. You know, if you get Ann Hood, she's a local celebrity. You know, that maybe you don't know that 4 months in advance, but that's something that you could hit like the Providence Journal with because they're a daily. You know, or you could hit a blog with, or you could hit Motif because their lead time is not going to be as long as like Providence Media.
Are you sending out press releases, and do you have a media list for yourself that you've developed?
No, I have reached out to East Side, and that's been a contact there, but I guess I was thinking with something like a reading series, it's more of an event, so it's kind of like you're looking for like an outlet that can kind of do like some sort of regular notice maybe that that people actually read. I feel like there's a lack of like, I feel like there's not like a central information source in
You
my
need to be
impression of Providence.
Yeah, no, well, they all have listings, and then if it's a big enough, if you can make the pitch that they're interested, you can get a story. But for the most part, you should have a database of all the local media outlets. If you want to do your own publicity, Google Rhode Island Media Guide, and I think it's put out, I can't remember what department of the State House puts it out. But yeah, here's the thing, guys. Every 2 or 3 years, the state of Rhode Island, if you're here in Rhode Island, puts out a media guide of all the local newspapers and radio stations and televisions and who to send it to. So make your press database. And then one of the best ways to do it, as you cultivate relationships with these people, then you can, because you're going to be pitching stories, if you do book Ann Hood, anything you have that's has a long enough lead time, you can pitch. If it's something that you don't know who's speaking until 4 weeks before, great, you go for the weeklies and the dailies and the online. But you have to be sending out, it doesn't have to be an incredibly long press release, but I find that with some of the local papers, it's best to write the article you want them to print. Sometimes someone will put their byline on it as they run your release, which has happened to me. But write it how you would like it to appear in print in the XYZ local paper, and you know, pitch where you live, pitch where it's happening, pitch all the people that are in it from their local towns or their local angle. But you have to be producing you have to be pitching. You have to send out the press release every month. You know, 4 weeks prior to an event is best. If it's an ongoing thing, you want to make sure it's in just the basic listings. The book listings in the Providence Journal is a great place to start. Make sure you're always in there. Because that's where your tribe who come to these events is used to looking for things to do.
And don't forget organizations like What Cheer, you guys send that weekly,
Absolutely.
you know, what's going on, you know. and
Pressing matters, yeah, it's daily and weekly.
Yeah, and as this community grows, I can actually see Pressing Matters being a resource to the journalists that cover the state. I mean, honestly, as with my work with Providence Media, it really is. Like, I check it and I see what's going on and who's got a thing and what's happening, and, you know, I'm constantly looking at that because that's, you know, I need story ideas.
Exactly, and as a freelance writer myself, you're looking for something to write about to pitch to your editor.
Yeah.
So just open up Providence Monthly, Rhode Island Monthly, East Side Monthly, go online, who's writing about this type of thing? Keep an eye on them, get in contact with them, and send them cool ideas.
Chances are they're a club member too, so you can find them. But it sounds like that's a good, a relevant question to not just someone putting on a reading series, but also for authors who are, you know, doing the readings,
Right.
you know, and thinking about those timelines and stuff for promoting your own book readings. Sorry, we want to get over here to your question.
That's okay, I understand, like, I'm kind of.
I see you now.
Are we ready? Okay, yay.
So I just
some everything specialist. I do a little bit of freelance illustration writing, web design, UX, a lot of things. And I'm starting a podcast. Because it's primarily a web-based, you're still writing, obviously. You're writing scripts. Because you're still working in a web-based, like, you're not gonna get as much print coverage. And I notice a lot of podcasts, they get it after they get famous. I kind of want to start, with a little bit of an audience to begin with. And I was wondering, I know a lot of websites, as a web developer, a websiter, somebody with UX, search engine optimization is something that we talk about a lot, but there's not really a lot of good resources. I don't know if you guys have come across that, because I know that you guys work with established publications. So basically, for those who are confused about what I'm talking about, it's basically like, optimizing your keywords and the way that you write things so that the algorithms can go ahead and like pick them up. How do you guys do that? I know you guys may have dedicated teams to that, but like just even as writers, how do you kind of do that without making it sound unnatural?
I'm not sure I'm following the question.
I'm not sure.
I think she's talking about
follow it.
SEO writing.
Yeah, you're talking SEO writing.
SEO writing,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
not really for an author book website. That's not generally where they're going with that. An author website's usually more like a business card in a way. People are already looking for you, and so as long as your website is optimized for your name and your book titles and author, you're usually okay. They're not going to find your website by searching like, biological experts who can speak on TV or whatever.
Right.
They're just looking at your website. They may be finding it from your email signature. Often they are. They're clicking through, or they've heard about you from your publicist, and they're like, well, let's see who this person is.
Okay.
And they're clicking to check, and they already know who you are.
Okay.
So SEO writing is as you know, it's a profession.
Yeah.
And but that's a different kind of profession, and I'm happy to talk to you about that later. It's a whole specific profession, but it's not
In
quite related to
regards
this.
The podcast, though, I do want to share that, is there a transcript or an article, but a text version of your conversation that you had with the person that can also appear online?
It hasn't started yet. So
Okay, so I would suggest, because I just had, I just read an interview that Terry Gross did instead of listening to it, because I couldn't listen to it because my kids were like, blah, 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 blah. So I read the transcript of the interview, and I think that there's something there that's also gonna solve your SEO problem, because yes, you've done the podcast, now also make sure that there's a searchable text version of it somewhere that is your interview about, or your talk about this topic. So there now you've kind of fed your search engine, you've fed your keywords. But if there's just the sound file, I can't,
And there are, transcription apps. You don't have to just go through and actually write. So
Yes.
we can talk about that too. Yeah.
I have a question, which was, you guys mentioned radio roadshows and of course podcast roadshows. And by roadshow, I'm assuming the author's probably just sitting in their bedroom or in our podcast studio answering
Calling
the
in.
questions, calling in. But are there any tips and tricks on how to land podcast or radio gigs? Are there specialists, publicists for that, and anything you could give there?
There's definitely specialists in the radio tour world. I work with several of them, especially in the book tour world, and then those have started to evolve podcasts. I believe every publisher should know podcasts today. The biggest piece of advice would be listen to them. There's some podcasts, like you might want to click on it and say be a guest, and they might say listen first, and like click through, and they're going to know if you didn't listen. So you really want to be familiar with what they're talking about, and if you really do fit their style. Some don't even do interviews, some just talk. So make sure that you're listening to what it is. But there's resources out there who do the radio tours where they'll set them up, back to back to back to back, and it takes a morning, and you do 10 to 20. Those were definitely a huge resource. I think 10 years ago, they're still there. Getting them all in one day has become a little bit harder, especially for an unknown name. If you can send a blast out there that you've got, I don't know, insert celebrity here, and you'll get them all lined up. But just because of the timing of everything, it's a little harder to do it all at once, but there's definitely specialists in there.
What kind of price would I be paying for that if I were an indie author?
I think they all vary,
Mhm.
I would say anywhere from 1,500 to 4,000 for 20 interviews.
But as an indie author, again, like, you can do this yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Go to,
Absolutely.
go to iTunes, right? And you can just, in the search box, put your keywords, like, if you're a fiction writer, or like, but you're gonna have to drill down a little bit, right? Like, what kind of fiction writer are you? Okay, well, I write urban fantasy, right? So now I'm gonna do urban fantasy author interview or something, independent, because I will say this too, as an independent author, a lot of places do not want to talk to you unless you are published by a major publisher. I mean, that's just the reality. So what, so again, like, and this is gonna be important for any outlet that you're talking to, whether it's gonna be a podcast or a TV show or a newspaper or a magazine, always go back and read it. Read a couple of issues at least, have an idea of what they're covering. Do an online search to see if they've already covered your topic.
Or Google your competition
Yep,
and see
and
where
see what
they've
they've
been. So that means whoever wrote about them or interviewed them is open to the topic. They may not do it tomorrow because they just did your competition, but to know to go to them.
Right. And make it manageable for yourself, right? So like, you put that in, you Google it, and okay, let's say, all right, as in the romance genre for a podcast, it's gonna be Smart Bitches, Trashy Books, right? Like, that's like the big one, right? You're probably not gonna get on that. Okay, but you wanna see kind of like when you're, Amazon has the also box, like, that's gold, right? You wanna see also similar to this podcast. And then you can start drilling down and you can start looking at these other podcasts that are similar to Smart Bitches.
Who want to be
Smart
smart
Bitches.
Seriously, because there's other people that need your content just like you need theirs.
Right, the content, the podcasters need interviews.
They need that.
Yeah.
So it's like looking at your own competition, look at the competition for the person that you want to write about you or to feature you,
And even if Smart Bitches did say yes, and I'm talking upturn, I've never even heard of Smart Bitches. You don't want to start there if you've never done a radio interview before. You want to start at Smart Bitches, fourth cousin twice removed, and get it practiced.
And the fact that I know, I want to say 4 people right now in my own very small circle who have started podcasts.
Yeah, anyone.
There's a lot of people out there who have podcasts, and then you can leverage that one interview in many different ways. It can help you.
So how would you leverage a podcast interview you already did?
Well, one, you have wonderful quotes about, that things you've said, things they said about you. So as a publicist, so-and-so.
As seen in.
Yep.
Yeah. So you have, your one sheet can now say you were on the blah blah podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Even throw down, now available on iTunes in there if you really want, to seem like it's more. Anything that it's all about, you now have a soundbite of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is shopping around for, you really want to talk to somebody that's very funny, but about this topic, and you have that one little sound clip of yourself talking to your friend Janet or whatever, and you sound professional and delightful, well, that's gonna go a long way, as opposed to them thinking, I wonder how they are.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they can interview.
I usually, when I'm approaching bigger TV outlets, for example, with somebody that they don't know, they say, I need to see tape.
Yeah.
Okay, because they need to know that whoever they're gonna book on their show is not gonna freeze. Or just not be delightful to a television audience, or even in a podcast situation, an auditory audience. So like, Susan, right? Susan?
Yes.
I like the Today Show, for example, is always looking for like tips and how-tos and that sort of thing. And I think that you probably sort of tap into their market with what you're doing. It sounds like you could.
Sounds like I could.
So you need to. You can't pitch the Today Show right now.
No.
But what you can do is maybe you can look at the Road Show.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what can you offer them? I think they're pay to play though. I'm
They
just
are.
gonna throw that out
Might be
there.
Go
That
local
too.
prov is pretty easy to get.
No, I
gotta remember this.
It'll give you a clip.
You want to be, yes.
Yeah, I think I've seen like builders on the road show, so I figured.
No, but it is pay to play,
Like
I'm pretty
some
sure.
sign-
Unless you can get
sure.
somebody to sponsor you, which is a totally other different
That's a
conversation.
whole, yeah, that's a different, yeah.
But I see what you're saying, you know, you start at the local markets, get something on tape that you
Yeah.
can farm out and get to something.
And also get a couple interviews under your belt, you know, do
Yeah.
the interview with the AM talk guy that also, you know.
My first radio interview is so hopefully unsearchable.
Aren't you glad you didn't?
Yeah. It's like, it just almost haunts me thinking about it.
But it's all, I mean,
Yeah.
really, it all stays online now.
Yeah.
For the
It lives
most
forever.
part.
Yeah, it could.
And so that's a good thing. Learn how to use it and then have it in your materials, have it in your press kit, your electronic press
The
kit.
more hits you get, the deeper down that goes on that Google search.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, just remember,
Bury it.
anything that you do get, grab it, download it,
Oh,
put it
yes.
into your own PDF, don't count on it remaining
Oh,
on
that's a
that,
good idea.
Dead links.
on,
Yeah.
you know, on whatever website it lives on.
I love a screenshot, I love a PDF, that's what your electronic press kit's gonna be. I don't care if the article came out 10 years ago, make sure you have a copy of it and it goes in until you have something better, you know?
There's also a local organization called Interview Connections that places you on podcasts and things. I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's Jessica Rhodes. She's a podcaster, local podcaster herself.
Right, let me write that down.
Yep, Interview Connections. Yeah.
They do national though, they're national. They just happen to be located in Rhode Island. It's a freakish
better.
location thing.
Which is great.
Mhm.
Mark, I'm sorry, thanks for being patient. Yeah, you have a question.
Oh, here we go. Oh,
So,
oh, I can't see you.
so I have, yeah, all right, here, I'll move over here.
Thank you.
So I have tried to niche for 20 years. In the last 4 years, I've released a book for middle grades, an audio book for preschoolers, a book for Jewish audiences, and I'm writing a book called The Fuck Ups that's written for grown-ups, except it has to be a young adult novel because they're 17 and 18-year-old protagonists. I've tried to draw a circle around everything. I mean, I just wrote down, okay, I'm the writer with ADD, but it's not really true. I do one project, I do really well. I have an epic poem about Loki that's really dark, just won an Audie Award finalist, looking at bringing it out as a play. So that was this year. The Fuck Ups is almost done. I'm looking for an agent and publisher. Not real hopeful about that because there are no vampires, there's no murders, there's no massive drug abuse.
Great title.
It is a great title. Anybody over the age of 50 goes, oh, you should change that title. But
I see asterisks.
Yeah.
oh, so I've been a self-publisher. I have the book is designed and ready. I could drop it tomorrow. Except I know how many of you have read my books. And so I'm trying to avoid doing the same thing again. I don't know how to you know, as soon as I bring out the Fuck Ups, my preschool middle-class moms are gonna like stop calling me, which is okay, fine. They haven't been calling me anyway recently. But I'd like to find a way to draw a circle around my work and say, this is who I am. I do a lot of things.
It sounds like you serve an awful lot of different audiences.
I do, and which is really hard to build a unified audience, obviously, but
Well, it may not be a demographic, it may be a psychographic as opposed to like age type, you know what I'm saying? Like there's people that you may focus on. Are you ADD? Is my-
no.
Okay.
Damn.
I know.
That's a good hook.
I'm only, and it's such a personal question, but I know it. But my kids are, so that's why. Because they will pick up one thing and laser focus on it, and then that's the thing that they're into, and then they move on to the next thing. So that to me sounds like that's what you give laser focus to the thing that fascinates you, and you discover, you dig deep into it.
It's really hard though to promote the
Right.
fuck-ups and Loki Ragnarok at the same time, because
Right.
they're
Well, they're different audiences, you're gonna have to talk to them differently. And your child, your YA or your kid audience, you have to say, okay, this is the behind the green door section of my website, where I think it's possible for you to have your brand be across the board and your work be in silos for each person that's going to come. You're not gonna appeal to all of them, but each is going to come looking for the thing that appeals to them. And I think it is possible not to alienate the moms, as long as you say, now I got some adult stuff coming out,
Have you considered, and this is a big, as somebody who does multiple genre work, I think we've talked about it, Anna, actually. Using
a pseudonym.
a different name, or not necessarily a
Initial.
pseudonym, but throwing an initial in, or just being first initial, last name with that,
I
because.
have, so the fuck-ups was originally written as the Bark Binder Project as a way of distinguishing it, but managing two identities
I know,
is
it's a
making me crazy.
Right.
I know.
Here's the thing, you can use your credentials for all your identities.
Yes.
So your backstory for all the identities is, it's by an author who has won these awards, who is an award-winning author, who is a best-selling author. And here's a book by them. But so you have the credential behind you already. You're gonna use that. That goes with you. You don't have to mention it's, and they did all the things at the kids thing. You just use that credentialed, published, he has 14 books published by big authors. You just kind of edit the bio a little bit for each one. That helps, because it gives credibility when you are going for the PR.
Yeah, I don't think you should dismiss an audience because now you're going in a different direction. I think you still need to cultivate those audiences for that work that is for them.
Mhm.
But yeah, you have an interesting conundrum.
Yeah. But I'm
Because
also,
you're so prolific, I mean, that's actually a good thing,
I'm
Yeah.
also thinking in terms of Amazon's algorithm, because you do say you self-publish, right? So like, if somebody's putting your name in there.
That's the problem.
Because they're looking for a book for their
Uh-huh.
12-year-old and the fuck-ups pop up, and then I mean, they're not gonna buy that, but, let's say they don't really read something carefully and they buy something, but, or your also blocks are gonna be like ridiculously off track, and these are,
Yes.
Oh my
that's.
God,
that's
yeah,
why in
the
Goodreads,
referral part of
bio-
it.
If you've
For
used
that
it, it's
little
before,
sidebar.
right? This is the Mark N. Binder is the name that Mark Binder uses for this genre.
For his
People
adult
do it all the
writing, or,
time.
yeah, I like that. I
Yeah.
think that might be a really,
For Goodreads
Nice
and for Amazon, that's
solution.
critical.
Yeah, cause
And
that,
didn't Shel Silverstein have
Oh,
quite
yeah.
a diverse,
He was like a Playboy writer or
yeah, I
something.
think so, I mean, I don't know how he did it, but it just came.
there were no
came out.
algorithms.
There were no
right, that would before the internet.
Before the internet, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're an award-winning writer, and this is the pseudonym that you use for this. Your other pseudonyms are this. They are for other
Right.
genres. Done.
And you can be forthright about that it's a pseudonym, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can silo that into one website. I mean, yeah, you can silo into one website. You can redirect if you want to have a couple of handles. You can redirect to one site. You can silo that. And particularly if you're picking like an initial, for this project or what have you, people will kind of know that it's you, but it's definitely a way to just keep those algorithms sort of separate so that you don't get sort of chewed up and spit out by Amazon. I mean, really, that's the only thing that I can think of. I mean, I think in terms of publicity and like, I think like that Audi is amazing, and that is something that should be like a headline, like that's press release headline worthy.
Right.
So you don't want to bury that for whatever you're releasing.
that goes across everybody.
Yeah, and particularly when you're talking to the media, so because there are very few exceptions where there's like a YA magazine person. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're talking to the book reviews editor, that's just the book reviews editor, and then they're gonna put that book into somebody else's hand based on what genre they cover. Do you know what I mean? So, but I do think when you're thinking about the algorithms, that's something completely different, and that's where you do need to throw a different letter in there,
I want to make sure we have time for everyone to meet our experts. I did see one more question, so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand. I'm curious, I know we talked about Facebook, you know, your personal Facebook where it's like, hey, I'm with my friends from college is different than hi, buy this collection of
Double fisted,
poetry
direct
or
text.
whatever, and stuff like that. But what about Instagram? And what about if on Instagram, like you have.
Separate.
You think?
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I'm so interjecting. If you're ever gonna do any marketing on Facebook and or Instagram, or any kind of paid marketing whatsoever, which you might boost something or something one day, you have to have the exact same account name for that account between Instagram and Facebook. So for example, for a flower farm that I work for, we are What Cheer Farm every single place. It can't be What's Your Flower in one place and Flower Farm in another place. It has to be the exact same friggin' name, especially between Facebook and Instagram.
And it should be, even though.
It
they
should be
say-
anyway.
Right.
And then try to always get it in Twitter too. if you
Also,
can.
you can't change, if you have, okay, fun fact, if you have a Facebook, like business page, you can't change the name.
Once.
You,
change
it's
it
one
once.
time.
One time,
You
can
have to
change
be
it.
really careful, because like, I've tried that, cause I have a page just for my art, and you can't change it, ever. Even if you try to rebrand or anything, you have to delete,
One time.
lose everything, and that's that.
So when you decide on what your brand is, make sure that it will also match you in 5-10 years. If you don't pigeonhole yourself as, you know, Marilyn Bush, YA writer.
Right.
Because what if I decide to, you know, 5 years down the line, you want it, you know, you want it to
I think
be.
with the Instagram piece, so that makes total sense. And
Yeah.
That's really helpful to kind of hear you guys parse that out about, you know, you can't change it later and that kind of stuff. But I wrote a lot of personal and kind of like memoir and poetry that's personal and like personal essays.
And that's fine for your business page.
Yeah, I feel
If
like.
you want-
Don't show your personal.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think if you want to take parts of your personal life and use that in your marketing package.
That's kind of what I was gonna say, is I feel like my personal actual Instagram, like if I have, you know, some picture of a beach, and then it's like my kind of beautiful little story or something under it, because I actually have both.
Cross
now.
post it, but don't
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
Set
say,
your
like I'm
pers-
going more into my personal.
To your
set your privacy to your privacy.
Mm.
Keep your own personal life private.
Duplicate the content and feed it over to your business
Yep.
page,
Yeah.
Instagram lets you put, like, you can sign into the app and you have multiple accounts. And
Yeah.
the same thing is if you're into Twitter, even though Twitter's terrible, if you download TweetDeck, you can have like up to, I think it's like 6 accounts or whatever, you can
Right.
switch between them, and you can have like.
Yeah, I
you
haven't
can
seen all the
share
accounts already, but I
feeds
guess
and
this is what I'm trying to say, is that I've already noticed that I have like blah, 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 rights or whatever account, and then a personal one, and I have like a lot more traction of people that follow my personal, because I think people like personal, especially when you're writing as personal, and then that,
You wanna
instead of
put it
a
over.
picture of me and my husband, it's like pictures of life, and then what I'm talking about is like, they're drawn more into
You
that.
You wanna send them to your business account.
And you can do
And
that on your
keep-
Yeah,
business
because
account.
how do I get my like 600 people to go to the other
That's the
site?
Ask them to
Tell
go.
them.
Yeah.
Tell them you're closing that down as you're changing privacy settings, or you're.
That one is private.
What?
Just
My
to
other
help
one.
support you
Yeah.
and to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Just, if you ask for
Ask them.
likes, people will give them to you.
Yeah.
If you say, I really wanna hit the next number, ask them. They will get their friends, they will share it, they will recommend it. You cannot, you know, it doesn't happen, it does
Yeah.
happen organically, but not in numbers. But if you ask people,
They'll
help me get to 10,000 by tomorrow, and I'm at 600, 6,000, just make it reasonable, but make it something that people can help.
That makes a lot of sense.
And
Yeah.
people
The
can
line
show
feels
their
funnier
support.
Because of what I write is
Right.
also
Yeah.
sort of
And
like.
that's
just-
great,
just
I
take
love
that line
content
in
like
there.
that.
Yeah.
You want it to be real, you know, it's not like some crazy Instagram thing where you're like, set it up and make sure it's perfect. No, people want reality and what the truth is, and then they will seek out your work.
You could just duplicate everything to the second account, and then you wouldn't have to think about two different identities.
Right, you
It's
just
like
need to
pretty
get
much
the
both
people.
identities are beats. So
Right.
it's almost annoying sometimes, because like something will happen and it's like, I
No,
take a
tell them-
picture
tell
and I
them-
have whatever, and I'm like, which
move
one of
them.
these do am I gonna
Just
put
move
this
them,
on?
tell them you're moving, you want them to move with you.
And then when people tag
Yes.
you know, then it's like in front of
Yeah.
everybody.
Right, yeah, well, that's why you
Yeah.
want it to be your business and not your personal, you know, and make sure people can.
That's
Tag
something
your
I run
personal.
into, because I write for kids, and I have kids, but I don't want my kids plastered all over the
That's
public.
what I was gonna say, is like I don't put, that's why my other one's private, like I, you know, I'm
Yeah.
kinda like have my son's face
Right.
blasted all over like my other personal essays, because they're not the same, even
Right.
if it is about like this like really meaningful parenting moment, that's like not
Well, you're
him. I don't know, it's weird.
You're not talking to necessarily your.
And I don't have to grow up and be like, oh my god, mom, I can't believe you published me.
Yeah.
About like my diaper or whatever.
Yeah.
They are like the best salesmen though, they really are. Like, when I get embarrassed, they're the ones that'll go up and tell people about my website and stuff like that. I'm like, you know.
Well, your friends will be your best sales people too.
Yeah.
Your friends love, I mean, I love sharing my friends' successes, and I'm always, you know,
Doing that, yeah.
I'm sharing stuff, so, but just make sure that if your brand is yourself, you still have to brand it as yourself. With
As the brand.
For public consumption,
Yep.
and not your actual life.
Good stuff.
It's like more curated.
All right, yeah,
Very
we're
curated,
gonna,
exactly.
thank you so much for your great questions, and let's thank the panelists. Thank you
Oh,
for their-
What is the